Hey friends, Bethany Bravery here. Welcome back to another episode of the Bringing Her Hope podcast. I am thrilled to introduce you to my guest today, Cari Malpass. Cari, thank you so much, girl, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Let's see, I grew up in a small coastal town in Oregon. I have been living in Oregon most of my life. I've been in the construction industry for years, working in small villages in Alaska for about the last 5 years.
Wow, so cool. So today, friends and Cari, we're going to be on top just unpacking this topic of the healing of the heartbreak of abortion. So it's going to be a heavy story today, but I am so grateful, Cari, for your vulnerability in advance, your transparency in advance, to take us on this journey of God's faithfulness in your healing story. So why don't you take us along?
All right. Well, I had been praying prior of where I kind of wanted to start this. And there's a few important areas that I kind of wanted to begin the journey of this topic. At a very young age, late 70s, I had an open vision of the Lord. And I was a young girl. I had been going to Sunday school off and on, as I had grown up in a Christian home. And I had an open vision of the Lord, and I never understood what the vision meant. And up until very recently, I'd always wondered what he was trying to show me or tell me. And as I've been along this journey of sharing my testimony and thinking more about it, he's just recently given me the revelation that that was an anchoring point in my life, not an explanation for anything, but it was him showing himself true to me and who he was. And I believe that throughout my life and throughout my journey, I always reference back to that vision as a young girl of six years old, of him and knowing that he was real. So that was that was a huge part of my life and the things I've gone through. So I wanted to share that piece. So I grew up in a Christian home, wonderful family. I had 3 siblings. We moved around a lot. I was a troubled teenage girl for the most part, maybe a little more than most. For a short stint, lived in downtown Portland area, and my parents moved me, actually, to back up, from Junction City, Oregon, a very small town. I lived there for about 6 years. We went to a local church. My parents, my brother and I were all baptized there. My parents were leaders in the youth, and it was a great place to live. I was there from about 2nd to 7th grade. When my parents moved us due to a job transfer, I was at a pivotal time in my life. It was about junior high. And I just kind of went wild, like all junior high people do at that age. But I took it a little step further. I ended up with an eating disorder. I was anorexic for a time period. I made friends with the wrong people. I dressed in black, took the bus downtown Portland at 6th grade. I mean, I don't know what my parents were doing at that time. Now that I look back, I know what they were doing. They were panicking, but their resolution was to try to put me in an all-girls school. That didn't work out either. So just to give a little history, I think in my youth, I've always been a little bit seeking the unusual, or running away from God, definitely the other direction, as much as I could. So giving you a little bit of that history, kind of flash forward, I had a high school boyfriend. We dated from, it was 15 to about 18 years old. And about the time I turned 18, I did not want to be in the relationship anymore. So I had broke it off with him. I had plans, and I did. I moved to downtown Portland to go to school by myself. I didn't have a car at the time, so I took the city bus around. We had decided at one point to reconcile and try to make things work about 6 months later. Well, at that time, I became pregnant. So I panicked. I wasn't ready to tell my parents. I didn't know what I was going to do. I became severely ill, and I was in and out of the hospital constantly. They actually diagnosed me with hyperemesis, which you occasionally hear women who deal with that. So I was severely ill, and to the point I had to share with my parents that I was pregnant. We decided to tell my parents, and no fault of to them, but the solution at that time, the mindset was, if you're pregnant, you get married. That's what you do. That's just a given. And being in a conservative family, I kind of knew that's what we would do. So
Yeah.
we did end up getting married. So I'm 19, pregnant, severely ill, married to somebody I really don't want to be married to. And I was at a point, I'm like, how did I get here? I think we've all been there.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've all been like, how did I get here? This is off course to where I thought I would be going. We were married. It lasted honestly 2 months. It was a short marriage. After 2 months, he had cheated, brought women home to our house, had parties there. I had been staying a lot of time with my mom and my dad because I was so sick and I needed care around the clock. So that ended. I moved back in with my parents, and I was just miserable and lost, to say the least. Miserable and lost. I can recall I would go out with my friends. People didn't know. Not everybody knew I was pregnant. I kept it pretty quiet, and I was still not that far along. And I would go out with friends. Everybody was excited to be either going to college or graduating or whatever their plans would be to get out of the small town that we had grown up in.
Yeah.
And I remember one day I was laying, and it's interesting to me. We all have these pivotal moments in our life that we can remember the detail of everything in that room, or at that situation. And I remember, this is 30 years ago, I was laying in my bedroom, and I was just sitting there thinking, what are my options? What do I do? What's going to happen? And I remember praying. I was like, Lord, is it okay to have an abortion? I know this sounds absolutely crazy to say. We know what it says in the Bible. We know that it's not right. Lord's never going to tell you, yes, have an abortion. But the enemy took that tiny twist and ran with it and made me believe that due to my lack of income to raise a child, due to the possible relationship I would have to stay in, that it would be better for the child to not be born. I truly believed it with all my heart. So I didn't even go into it as a selfish ambition, which, I mean, maybe truly, if you were to examine the heart, that is where it came from. But I, however, made myself believe that I had the okay to have the abortion. And back in that time, we had phone books. I looked in the yellow pages under abortion. I looked under the A's, abortion. And I remember laying in my bed, and I just called and I said, what do I do? How do I go through this? I have no idea. This was before being able to pull up what is an abortion online. Like what does it look like? There wasn't those type of things available. You didn't know much and they didn't tell you much. So you were limited on your information. I called them, spoke with them. They're like, here's the time. They set up a time, and I made an appointment. And I was like, okay. And I could barely, and this is a sensitive area, I know what I'm about to share, but I almost didn't hit the cutoff time as to when I could have the abortion. I was far enough along. I felt the baby. I knew I was pregnant. I knew there was a baby. It wasn't a fetus in my mind. I felt it. I knew it was there. And I was to the point of starting to show, and they're like, you have to come in the next couple of weeks, or we can't do it because you'll be too far along. So the only thing that went in my mind is I have to go get it done right now. I have to. So I had contacted, at that time, my best friend, and I said, I need help. I need someone to drive me to this clinic, and she was like, I cannot get time off from work right now. So she had a friend who I had no relation to, didn't know, nothing, drive me up. And this process, being that I was far enough along, was a 2-day process. So the first day you would go in and they would, well, I'm going to back up. The first day I went in, I actually was downtown Portland. It was on Northwest Lovejoy. I remember everything about it. I remember he dropped me off a couple blocks away from the clinic, and there was people picketing out front, and they were yelling and screaming. And these were people who, probably not everybody, but in my mind, what stood out to me the most is these were Christians. These were Christians. And there was no compassion. There was no, can I talk to you? Can I pray with you? Can I do anything like that? It was just like disgrace and anger and judgment and everything you would imagine, of what that would look like. So I kind of ran through that. I went into the clinic and I sat down. The lady called me back, and they immediately did an ultrasound, and she's like, the atmosphere in the abortion clinic was not what you would anticipate. It was actually like you were going into a doctor's office to have a baby. Everybody was happy. And I'm sure this was part of their culture there, being what they did. Everybody was happy. Everybody welcomed you. It was a great day. It was nothing like, so it was an atmosphere that really drew you into, you were making a good decision. You were doing the right thing. So I went in there and I lay down, and the lady's like, I'm going to do an ultrasound. I was like, okay. And she's smiling and she's like, oh, the baby's so cute. Do you want to see? And I was like, yeah. I was like, no, I absolutely do not want to see. And I was like, what is going on? I honestly, I'm 19. Nobody knew except for my best friend. Nobody knew. So it wasn't anything that I could share. I started, right there was a time I just started suppressing. So I can deal with this. I can deal with it. So they did an insertion of 3, they're kind of like pellets that would make you dilate, and you would go home that night. So I remember I went to my friend's house, and it was about an 1.5-hour drive from Portland. And I remember laying on the couch. And again, I remember every detail. It was like one of those pivotal moments. Once again, I remember where the lamp was. I remember the couch. I remember laying there. I remember I started having cramping feelings. And that was part of it. Just like if you were gonna, before you have a baby, all of the birthing signs. And I just was, those thoughts would go through your head and be like, oh, what if I change my mind? And that idea, it's too late. It's like, it's too late. And I'm not saying I did change my mind, but those things go through when all of a sudden you no longer have control of your situation.
For sure.
So I remember going back in the next day. I remember laying down. He dropped me off again. And I remember laying down on a bench with a big light over me, doctors and nurses. And I was put out. And I remember waking up in a recovery room, and I was sick because I had just came out of anesthesia. I was very sick, actually. And I didn't even know. And as soon as they see my eyes open, they're like, okay, get up, put you in the wheelchair. They wheel you out. And then here's this, stranger essentially ready to pick me up. And I'm just bleeding profusely. And it was horrible. And I just remember the drive back is an 1.5-hour later drive, and I'm bleeding, I'm sick, I'm still under anesthesia, I'm with a stranger in a vehicle. And I all I could think of was, what do I do next? How do I tell people? Because my parents, my family, my boyfriend at the time, everybody knew I was pregnant. So I hadn't really came up with this solution prior to what I was going to tell people.
Yeah.
So I went home and, well, not home. I went to my friend's house and I laid there, and instantly I was like, I want my mom.
Mm.
I was like, I have to deal with this. I cannot be here. I need my mom. I need to go home. And that next morning I ran across the street to a payphone and I called my ex-boyfriend and I said, I had a miscarriage.
Mm.
And he was extremely upset over it. Extremely, but I was never going to admit to anybody I had an abortion. I mean, that was locked and sealed.
Mm.
You know, from that day going forward, that wasn't an option that I would ever tell anybody. And then I had to call my mom, and I remember calling and I was like, Mom, I had a miscarriage. And she was like, well, what happened? And I didn't really have answers because I didn't even know what that would look like. What do you do if you have a miscarriage that far along? I don't know. So I was like, Mom, I had a miscarriage. I need to come home. I don't feel good. And she's like, okay. Well, did they do a D&C? You know, all these things. She started medical terms. And I was like, I don't know. No, they didn't. You know, I think she finally stopped asking because I was distraught and she knew it was too much. So my girlfriend at that time was able to drive me halfway to meet my mom. And I just remember her in the parking lot and she just kind of hugged me. And I went into a restaurant, into the restroom, went to the bathroom. And I just remember being there and just like all of a sudden this shock of all that happened in the last 2 days kind of hit me. And I kind of had this flood of emotion. I didn't feel well. And that was the point of my feelings. I don't even know if I can put into words. I guess, again, it would be the suppression of feelings.
Yeah.
And I realized, okay, I can only get through this if I suppress this and not feel it. And that's what I did. It was pivotal because I look back and the enemy had me really believing that abortion would bring me freedom in my life. But really, it just put me in the chains that he wanted to have around me. Yeah. And that was chains of shame. That was chains of lack of identity. It was so many different things. And it started to harden my heart. It was the beginning of hardening my heart, honestly. And
let me ask you,
yes.
You know, prior to you getting the abortion, you were at least dialoguing with the Lord, even if you were asking him what seemed like a crazy question, you know, is it okay if I get this abortion? What, you know, when you were at the place where you're at this restroom 2 days later and you're processing through all of these things and you're basically setting this bar of, I can't feel these emotions anymore, otherwise I won't survive. Did you kind of close down your conversation, your dialogue with the Lord, or were you still reaching out to him in some way?
I closed it, but he didn't.
Yes.
I closed
Amen.
I absolutely closed it. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The shame was so overpowering that even though I didn't even directly have these thoughts, I knew in my spirit that this is unforgivable. You know, this is unforgivable. This isn't something the Lord's going to forgive me for. And if he does, it comes with punishment. That's what I honestly believed. He's, you know, if I'm going to have kids, I'm going to be punished. Maybe I'll never be able to have kids, all those things, because I really believed in my heart of hearts that the God at that time that I served was a God that, which he is a God of justice, but was a punishing God. Gotcha. And that's due to the very religious atmospheres that I grew up in as a child. Just, you know, you just don't sin. There wasn't repentance. There wasn't any of that. You just don't do it. Yeah. So I truly believed going that day forward, I'm like, this is unforgivable. And that really had me pulling away from the Lord immediately once it was done. After I had the abortion and I kind of settled back in, it didn't take long for somebody to come in my life that I had met. He had just came home from the Navy. He was a outgoing, jovial, fun, exciting person. And I'm like, okay, this guy's kind of interesting. He's taking me away from my thoughts, my concerns of what I've done, and shifting gears. And so I started dating him, and we instantly fell into a very abusive relationship physically. But not only that, I remember the first time I was at a party, and I was sitting there, and I was watching everybody snorting lines. At that time, it was called crank. It's just different. And I remember thinking, how could anybody do that? Like, that is so gross. That's just disgusting. How could I ever do that? Or how could anyone do it? And I remember the more involved I got with him, I almost, in some weird way, felt deserving of the way he was, the physical aspects, because of what I had did.
Yeah.
That I was like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. I was like, of course you're going to be with someone like that. Look what else you did. It just started compiling these lies, the enemy's lies, into my mind and my spirit. It took about 2 months. And again, I'm at a pivotal point. I remember the table. I remember the location of the house. I remember everything about it. And I started doing the same thing. I got involved in crank, and I became involved in crank. I became involved in mushrooms. I smoked marijuana. I drank. I did acid. You name it. I was like, it was a free for all. I didn't care.
Yeah.
I didn't care. And when you you participate in the company of people in that environment, you just fall into it. You fall into it. There's no way not to. And when you have a group of people like that, it becomes accepting and okay, because everybody's doing it. So what's the problem? This went on for about a year. The abuse was terrible. The emotional abuse was terrible. The drug use, honestly, I would hear the Lord, and he's like, what are you doing? I remember I'd hear him, and he's like, this is so dirty and gross. And why are you involved? And these are not your people. This is not your environment. And I didn't care. I was miserable. I didn't care. I wasn't who I was. And I didn't know what I was at this point, or who I was.
Yeah. Well, and if you believe, like, if there was some foundational belief of, I have to be perfect for the Lord, my track record must look like this, otherwise he won't receive me or he won't love me.
Yes.
You probably were throwing it all out the window, because it's like, well, I'd already made a mistake, so there wasn't this chance of grace. There wasn't this chance of mercy. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was to the point that nothing matters anymore. He's not going to forgive that. He's not going to forgive this. I might as well enjoy this time right now and not feel anything. And anybody who's dealt with drugs knows that is the cure all for emotions. That's the cure all for pain. That's the cure all for dealing with things in your past.
Yeah.
And that's why people get involved with it. It numbs you, and whatever the addiction is. So that was the beginning of that. I wasn't doing that lifestyle too long. I don't know, about a year into it, the guy that I was dating, the police had been watching us, actually. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but I look back and I don't even think it's me anymore. But the police were watching us, and they said, we know what you guys are involved in. My boyfriend was dealing drugs at the time. And they said, you have two options. You have one option, we're going to arrest you. Or you have the second option. Being my boyfriend, goes in with a wire to bust a bigger drug dealer in the area.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was
very holy.
Yeah. I know. And I was like, well, I'm not going to get arrested. I'm like, and I really, at that time, they didn't really have anything on me. It was more of a threat. They knew my association with him, and it was a way to get us to go in and do that. So he went in with a wire, and long story short, the guy did not go to jail, and we had to move. We had to leave the area because the guy knew who we were, and he was looking for us, obviously. It's like, I'm looking for those people that went in wired into this motel room. And again, I'm at another pivotal time where I remember everything about that evening, where I was, how I felt.
Yeah.
So we moved away. And now I'm living with a man who is extremely abusive, still dealing drugs. I'm away from all my family and away from my friends. And after about a year of that lifestyle, and I'm talking abuse of driving down the road and being punched in the face randomly. I'm not talking about a slap, not that a slap's any better or
Right.
not as bad, but I mean, I had broken lamps over me. I had, if I bought something new, it would get thrown out or thrown away or smashed or whatever. It went beyond physical and emotional to just, it was a horrible, horrible environment. And as every woman knows, and every woman has done, we believe we can change people.
So true.
We believe that this person's so sad is why they act this way. And if we just love them a little harder, or if we just show them that other things can be, he can go another path, they'll do it. And that doesn't happen.
Well, and I think there too can be dysfunction on our part of, we want to be needed, we want to have value.
Yes.
So if there's this codependency of, I will be their helper and I will be their cheerleader and I will, see them through, then maybe that's what my identity is. Because I'm sure, as you were saying, you were searching for identity. Who am I? Who is this woman now?
Yeah, absolutely. And the enemy, again, uses that. What you think you're doing for good, he uses that, and he's like, yeah. And he'll twist just a little bit of truth. And it's just easy to believe that you can love somebody different, that they'll eventually have a different mindset if you stick with them and you stick it out. Or again, it's like, oh, it's not that bad. I didn't wreck when he punched me. I mean, it's crazy. And I remember in my younger years thinking, how does anybody stay with someone who's abusive? I mean, I think everybody who hasn't dealt with it at one time or another has had that conversation. Why would somebody put up with someone like that? And even now, when someone that knows me hears this story, they're shocked, because I am a very independent and a very strong woman. And the idea that I could fall into that and believe that it was healthy, or just that believe to stay in it, even if it was unhealthy, is absolutely crazy. It's just not, that's not who I am. So it took about a year continual of that. And then one night, after a very abusive situation, he had broke out the windshield of my car with his fist, and admitted to me that he was homosexual. And he had feelings for a relative of mine. So I'm at this point, I'm almost like laughing. I mean, inside, I'm like,
you're like, what else do you want to add to my,
this is nuts.
Oh my goodness.
What do I do with this? I don't even know right now. And in that point, my dad and mom kind of caught on to what was going on, with his abuse. They didn't know anything prior, but my dad's like, you're done. You're not going back. You're done. If that's it. And I knew it was a time. I also knew it was over. I wasn't going back into that environment again. And it kind of finished that. So kind of moving forward, I remarried. I had a son, and we ended up divorcing when my son was 3. I found the next person I found had no emotion. Basically wasn't going to physically abuse you, but also wasn't going to show you a lot of affection or caring, or you couldn't even say the words, I love you. I mean, it was completely opposite. And I think that I thought, well, that's safe, and I'm in a safe place, that I don't have to worry. He's not on drugs. He's not abusive. He's nothing. I mean, almost to the point. So that only lasted so long, for obvious reasons. But after we divorced, I had moved back up to Portland to go to school. My son was in 2nd grade, and he hated living in Portland. And my ex-husband had convinced me that he should go live with him. And, and I look back, leading up to that point, I do want to touch on the fact that when I had my son, I truly believe in my heart of hearts that I had very difficult time bonding with him. And I don't think that everyone's prepared or even realizes when you've had an abortion,
Yeah.
and you've suppressed those feelings of motherhood, those feelings of labor, those feelings of everything that you're not going to go through. When it actually happens, you cannot just switch that off.
Yeah.
It's still there. It's still there. And it really affected my bonding with my son. And I would have to say that probably for several years it did. I, obviously I loved him, and I'd love him, but it was just different. I didn't feel motherly. And the enemy really came in with that. You're not maternal. You're not a maternal person. You're not a mother. You're not, look what you did. How could you don't even deserve to have this child. All those whispers that were constantly going on in my mind all the time. So I let him go back and live with his dad. I was heartbroken. I mean, so heartbroken, that I would just cry all the time. And, I didn't know I was going to get emotional.
Okay, Cari.
I remember I would just cry and cry. And I came to another point that I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm not going to feel this anymore. It's too much for me. So I would suppress it. And every time I was able to suppress it, I felt strong. Honestly, I felt strong. I felt like, look, you can deal with anything.
Yeah.
This is awesome. You can suppress an abortion. You can suppress physical abuse. You can suppress the loss of your son, which it wasn't the loss of my son. He just went to live with him for 2 years. But the reason I was so upset, I believe, is because it brought me back to how I felt when I had an abortion. I let him go, even though I didn't. In my spirit, in my heart, I felt like, oh, look, you can't even raise a child.
Yeah.
So that was a very significant time. After that happened, it was a free for all. I was like, I don't care anymore. I'm done. And I started going out every night of the week. I had a successful job. I had a beautiful condo downtown Portland. I was successful. I had friends. I had people to go out all the time. I drank like crazy. I became wrapped up in sex clubs, swingers clubs, underground clubs that people don't even know about. Very, very demonic places. Very dark. People were dressed in actual, like, looking back, I don't know how they described it, but what it was is they would be dressed up and looking like demons, essentially, in some of these club environments. And they were underground and they were dark. And that, as much as the occult was after me, so was God. And that was my saving grace, because I never got so involved into anything that the Lord didn't pull me out of, or that I came to a realization, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you here? This is not a good place to be. I would meet men anonymously off the internet. I had no care for myself. I gave fake names. I didn't want a relationship. I didn't want to date. I wasn't interested in any kind of intimacy. I don't know that I could have had intimacy with anything or anybody at that point. So I started dabbling in porn. I started, my focus was honestly in the sexual arena. I wanted attention from men. I wanted the attention to the degree I wanted it. And then I didn't want it anymore. And that desire or need from a man fulfilled the areas of insecurity. I always dealt with, I dealt with that anorexia when I was 13, and it came full circle again in my mid 30s, where I got the same way again. I couldn't change all the pain inside of me, but I could change the way my outside looked and what people's perception was of me.
Yeah. That false sense of control can be such a you know, something, we think it's the one thing that we can have. It's the one thing that we can hold. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And when it works for you, you're like, well, this is what I need to do. And you will never be satisfied. You'll always want to be a little skinnier. You'll want to be a little prettier. You'll want to look a little younger. You know, you want to spend another extra $100 on the next expensive pair of jeans. It's like, it doesn't stop. It just pulls you in constantly, but it's never enough. And for the people you typically surround yourself in those environments, it's never enough for them either. And they constantly want more. And I just remember just feeling like I just felt terrible about myself. If somebody, like if a man or a woman or anybody was to say something like, oh, you look beautiful, you know, or whatever, I really took offense to it. I didn't feel beautiful, you know, and I thought they're joking, they're being sarcastic, you know, whatever. I couldn't receive anything like that because of how I felt about myself. It was terrible. So that went on for quite a while until I met another man, and my son was back with me at this time, and we started dating. And one of the first times we got together, we had been drinking. He was a drinker. We were and he smoked marijuana. You know, we were involved in that kind of stuff, more the light stuff, not the hard stuff. But I just remember one of the first nights that we went out, we had been drinking, and he started talking to me in a third person. And I was like, what's going on? And he would also, almost like he would be talking to somebody else and not me. And I thought it was weird, but I thought I was weird for thinking it was weird. So I was like, okay, I don't know who he's talking to. I don't know what's going on. I'm sure that I'm just thinking that something's more about it than it really is. And that began the start of a 10-year terrible, emotionally abusive relationship, to the point that he put sticky notes on every door, every lid, everywhere in the house as to what he needed to have done, what his expectation was. If I gained 5 pounds one time, and he broke up with me because I gained 5 pounds. And for someone who deals with body image, that doesn't go over well.
No.
So you immediately are like, okay, he's right. I need to get that 5 pounds off. I do want to back up because I do want to touch on that body image with women. And my first proposal with my first husband was, if you lose 20 pounds, I'll buy you an engagement ring.
Oh my goodness.
And the enemy had my number. The enemy had my number.
Yeah.
And I remember going, oh, really? Just 20 pounds? I can do that. I didn't even look at it as that's crazy or anything. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. You know, whatever. I was young, and I thought, I could probably lose 20 pounds. Not a big deal. So this was a theme throughout my life as I was with different men, probably based on the ones I met and their standards and what they were really looking for. So I remember that he broke it off with me, and then we got back together, and we'd break up, we'd get back together. It was just a constant up and down cycle. And he would just say terrible things. He didn't want to be around my family. He hated my family. He hated my father and my brother. He wanted me to have nothing to do. He really tried to seclude me, which is not a good sign with anybody. And I was miserable. If I could get any lower, I was now at my lowest. And I remember walking around one time, and my dad, who had always throughout this time was like, I'm praying for you. And I'd just be like, whatever. I didn't even want to hear it. I didn't want to hear he was praying for me. If worship music came on the radio, I had to turn it off immediately. I would hear the Lord calling, and I would be like, I cannot do it. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And throughout my lifetime to this point, God showed up in so many ways. I would go to work at a new job, and my manager would be a pastor's wife. I wrecked a car and I was in the middle of nowhere and a pastor drove by and picked me up.
Mm.
The list goes on and on, that these people that he's put in my life as a reminder of his goodness.
Mm.
And
Good.
it's amazing. It's amazing. And I'm sure if there's other things that I'm not even thinking about, there's just numerous times he's shown up. And I remember my dad, finally, I just had this countenance about me of heaviness, and
Mm.
my face, I just that, I know we've all experienced, but it's such a heavy weight
Yeah.
that you barely feel like you can hold your shoulders up. You can barely smile. Your eyes look through the lens of just, and void
Mm.
to that point. And I remember my dad came up to me one time and he gave me a hug and he said, "Sis, you look miserable. Why are you so miserable?" And I was like, oh my gosh, somebody notices that? You know?
Mm.
I'm like, people see this? Because I thought I'd been doing a wonderful job of,
Yeah.
but look, I've got a successful job. I have a nice car. Look at these nice clothes I have. Look at my friends I have, look at all these things I have. I'm
Yeah.
confident. See how confident I am?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Why would you say that? And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. November 2017, the Lord's like, I'm done. You are coming back. You're coming home. And I was like, whoa, wait, Lord, can we ease into this a little bit? I need to, like, okay, I hear you. What does this look like? And he's like, no, I'm not. And I know we're always at our free will, but I do believe at times God comes at you so strong that he's like, no, there's no other option. This is the
Mm.
option. You're coming home. And I remember being like, okay, I'm coming home. And I was still dating this man. And I went to church and I was like, this is where I need to be. I need to be at church. And I wasn't living in Oregon at that time. I was up in Alaska. And I remember I came home and I told my boyfriend at the time, I said, I'm going to start going to church. And I don't know, I would like you to go with me, but if that's up to you. And I promise you that the reaction I got when I shared that, he basically almost manifested. It was insane. He just got so violent, so freaked out,
Mm.
so out of sorts. And he was like, I know what this looks like. I know what this means now that you're going to church. And that was the beginning of the end, basically. For 6 months, we stayed together and I was away and working in a village. And I was praying and I was like, Lord, I don't know how to get out of this relationship.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. And I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to break it off with him. Every time I try, something happens. I need you to intervene. I need you to intervene and to show me what you want me to do. I need you. I mean, I was crying out. I was at my last point. I was like, help me. I cannot do this. And the next day, and this is the very next day, my boyfriend at the time called me and he's like, it's over. And I said, I was shocked. But I was like, okay, Lord, wow, you work fast.
Mm.
I was like, okay. And I remember I just had an emotional breakdown that day. And it wasn't just because of that. It wasn't even a negative emotional breakdown. It was, I knew there was a shift coming. I knew this was God. I knew that I can no longer be in this place that I've been for so many years,
Mm.
that it was almost like, I don't want to say mourning an old life because I didn't want it anymore, but I knew again, it was a significant time and I didn't know what was ahead. I didn't know what it looked like because I had to give complete control over. I had to.
I think that's a really good point though to talk about for a second, is even if you're living in dysfunction, even when you're living in abuse, there is some mourning for what you knew. It's even
Yes.
if it wasn't, what it was supposed to be. And a lot of people don't understand that, women that need to walk out of an abusive relationship and then they almost want to go back and they're like, wait a minute, you have freedom now. they don't
Yeah.
even understand how to recognize what that looks like, because it's something
Absolutely.
that they haven't had. And you know,
Mhm.
it's the comfortable, even if it's the dysfunctional. So I'm so glad that you even
Absolutely.
shared that, because there's probably someone watching right now that's like, yes, that's me, and no one understands.
Yeah.
God has more. And freedom is stretching. Freedom
Yes.
can hurt, because with it comes healing. So go ahead. I just wanted to make
Absolutely.
sure
No, it's
you mentioned
beautiful.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's loss of identity. You
Yep.
you clung to an identity and a belief of who you were and
Yep.
how you were going to live out all your days, possibly. And once that shifts and it's no longer there, you don't know what your identity is now.
Yeah.
So the Lord's going to form that and shape that. But you're
Mhm.
also a little cautious because you're like, Lord, what if I don't like the identity you're going to give me? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
going to be honest, there's
Totally.
that little bit of fear. It's like,
Yep.
what if I can't live up to that identity you want me to have?
Yeah.
All those things start going through your mind. But I remember driving one day and it was so clear. And the Lord's like, I want to give you the love I have for you.
Mm.
But you have to let go of this. You have to let it go because I cannot give it to you unless you do. And I just remember it was so clear. And I was just like, all right, I'm going to have faith. And I was like, well, in my mind, I was like, worst case scenario, I'm alone forever. Okay. That's not the end of the world. Just different things go through your head at those
Yeah.
times in your life that you're like,
Yeah.
that's okay. So, I came back to Oregon, and I started attending a local church with my brother. I walked in and it was like, they joke about it, like where you hear like the angels singing in the background. And I was like, I'm home. It was such a strong pull that I was like, I don't know, but I have to be here. I have to be
Mm.
here. This is my home. These are my people. And I loved it. I still love it. I'm still there. And I just remember going in and the Lord started whispering in my ear about a singles group. And I was like, no, Lord, no. I'm like, that's
You
not
don't
me.
understand. I'm in
Yeah. Right.
agreement with you that there would be no one else.
I know. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is not me. I'm just coming back, to you, Lord. I'm like, why would you want me to do this?
Mm.
I have my own issues to deal with, little known, go in and a singles group.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, I started a singles group and we had quite a few people. We made some really great relationships, and I made a really good relationship with a man that was in there. And we were just friends. The last thing on my mind was a relationship. Honestly, it was like that was nothing. I mean, I was to the point I really was believing that if I don't ever have one, I'm okay.
Mm.
Whatever the Lord has for me, that's what I want. And he asked me out on a date. I said no. I was like, no, I'm just looking for friends. I've just left a terrible situation. And so he was very steadfast, and he was like, okay. And we were friends for 6 months, and I had a dream. We got married. I joked around with him. I'm like, oh, I had a nightmare. And
Nice.
we got married. He's like, that's awesome. Why haven't you told me? And I was like, why would I tell you?
Yeah.
And so a few months later, I started having feelings. I started feeling feelings towards him, and I panicked because I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Is this my flesh? Because my flesh has led me astray
Yes.
throughout my entire life. It's like that I cannot count on emotions. I can't count on anything. So I was freaked out, to say the least. I was really freaked out. And I called a pastor and I was like, I have a problem. And he's like, well, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm having feelings for somebody and I think I need deliverance. And he's just like, okay, you probably need deliverance. That may not be why, but like, so it's still, a joke, of course,
Yes.
now, but, we started dating, and, we were engaged 6 months later. We got married 2 months ago, and we've been married a little over a year. And God is so faithful. God has redeemed my entire past in ways that is indescribable.
Yeah.
I don't even know, I can speak of those things that happened in my past, the abortion, the sexual addiction, the pornography, the promiscuity, that everything. I can speak about it, but I'm not attached to it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's not who I am. It's not how I feel. It's not anything that affects me anymore, my emotions or my spirit, because not only was I delivered from those things, and I was truly again in my life, born again. I mean, like, as a new creation. I'm not that person of old. I don't have the mindsets of that. I am thankful, so thankful for the man that he's brought into my life. He's absolutely the love of my life. And he's the most loving person that, even from the time we've gotten married to this last year, the walls that have came down just with me and the process has changed my walk with the Lord, has changed our focus together as, we're kingdom warriors. That is our mindset. And that's what God put us together for. It wasn't for fleshly desires. It wasn't for, loneliness. That's not why God put us together. God said, I need you and I need her, and I need you to come together as one for the kingdom. That's our purpose and that's our intent. There is, and I don't mean to sound like there isn't love, because there's an abundance of love between us, but it's so much bigger than that. And we're just so blessed and thankful every day for what we have.
Incredible. Cari, how are you able to, or how is God using your story now?
Oh my goodness. This is where I am passionate for women who have had an abortion. The Lord has put so many people in my path that have had one that cannot speak the words that they've had one. They're walking in so much shame. And these are Christian women. These are not just people in the world that don't know our Savior. And I am like, there's freedom. But there's a process to receive the freedom. And I am pro-love. I am pro-love. And I want to love the women that have had an abortion. I want to love the women that's even thinking about having an abortion. I want to open up those lines of communication that says, let me tell you my story, because our testimonies are what heal people and direct them in a different place. And I'm passionate about women who don't have the abortion, who almost did. There's just so many areas in abortion. It doesn't just affect the woman having the abortion. It affects the man. It affects the grandparents. It affects, so many people. It's not just one act and that was it. It's so much bigger. It's such a bigger scope than that. And I truly believe the enemy is after our wombs as women. I believe that is an area that he has came after. And I believe that is a portion of why women struggle with their identity, with their sexuality, with everything. He wants it, and he wants to take it. And I feel for women who feel they have no other choice. And my heart's desire is for the community, the churches, to be able to come together and have this conversation about abortion, and what, as a church, can we do to support these women who feel they have no other option.
I love that. Okay, so a woman is watching right now, or she's listening right now, and tears are running down her face because she's not where you're at. She's in the middle of it. Whatever it is, what would you say to her?
Oh, I would say that there is freedom in Jesus Christ. There is absolute freedom in Jesus Christ. And it is the Holy Spirit can heal those places in your heart. And I know that you remember your abortion every single day, because until you have freedom, it's you see a baby and you think about your abortion. You look at your child, you think about your abortion. You go to the date you had the abortion, you think about the abortion. You think about the day that your baby would have been born, you think about the abortion. And there's absolute freedom and healing in Jesus Christ. Absolute, 100%.
So true. Cari, the enemy, it was evident as you told your whole story, he kind of figured out what those markers were. He figured out you wanted some identity, and he wanted to take a quarter twist turn on it and give you a lie with that. And he knew that there was something you were longing for as far as pursuit, from a
Yeah.
man, and to be told that you're lovely and beautiful, even though, you received it in, dysfunctional ways that he never had
Right.
in mind for you. But now that and we've not all arrived, right? There's always healing.
Yeah.
So I want to be really careful. Like, our job on this podcast is not to wrap
Yeah.
everything up in a pretty bow, but we're all in process
Oh.
with Jesus. But what would you say to maybe the listener that's asking, okay, Cari, I see how God has redeemed your story, and I love that you're walking in freedom, but do you ever struggle with the eating disorder again? Do you ever struggle with the desire for, sexual stuff that's outside of what God intended? And how
Yeah.
do you respond to that?
I absolutely still deal with the eating issues. It's an ongoing process. I'm always like, Lord, I don't want to be vain. I'm like, help me, Lord, give me self-control. I'm always praying for self-control in my life, especially in the arena of food. And I don't know, I don't know what the Lord has for that, because sometimes I think there are just areas that we deal with constantly, that we have freedom, that we know truth. We know that I'm not fat, I'm not too skinny, I'm not ugly, all those things. But I do think that sometimes those things are still a reminder of what other people are going through. I don't know if I'm making sense clearly, but it's a piece that you still deal with, because you he's also wanting you to support others that are dealing with it, or maybe don't see it, or in the midst of serious medical issues with it, or mental, attachments to the idea of that you need to look a certain way or be a certain way. And even right now, I'm going to be honest and vulnerable. When I got married, when COVID hit right at the time we got married, I put on 10 pounds, and I was under distress. I thought, oh my gosh, Troy's going to think I'm not attractive anymore. He's going to be like, oh my, you need to get that 10 pounds off. Those are the things that start feeding from things that have happened in your past. And you have to get your thoughts, you have to take your thoughts captive. And that's how you battle the enemy. You have to take your thoughts captive, and know that that's a lie. That's not truth. And sometimes you have to do it constantly for days. It's part of the process of healing. Healing is identifying it's an issue, taking it to the Lord, and he does what he does for his purpose and his will, and we don't always understand it. Maybe I won't have complete freedom, sense that it's not going to always be a little memory here and there about it, or a little fear of being overweight, or anything like that. But I have complete faith. Whatever his plan is the right plan. So
what did forgiveness, let's talk about that category a little bit. I think healing and through redemption, sometimes it's, I need forgiveness, I need to ask for forgiveness, or I need to forgive these people that, those guys that treated you the way that you did, or I need to forgive myself. So what has the journey of forgiveness look like for you?
That is, you hit it right on the head. Forgiveness for the people in your past and what they've caused you. True forgiveness is so essential to healing. And I think forgiveness to those people right along into repentance. I think repentance is a huge part of it, but you have to, in your heart of hearts, forgive. And it is difficult to do. And we cannot do it by our human nature, only through supernatural, ability through the Lord, because it's not something you can just be like, okay, I forgive you. Obviously that's, you want to forgive, but you have to ask the Lord, help me to forgive, and help me to, we don't need an understanding as to why they were the way they were, but I have compassion for everybody, even when I wasn't always following, the Lord entirely, because they came from somewhere that they were taught these habits. This isn't something that they just decided to be, or who they decided to be. So I always fall back on compassion, that person's still struggling in their life in those areas. And, whatever they dealt with in their childhood, whatnot, it's something in this world that people deal with. And I always follow to compassion and then to forgiveness. And when you can have the heart in that sense, be able to truly, truly forgive with the help of the Lord, that's the first step in healing.
Yeah. Cari, I want to end on this question before we wrap up. If you could sit down with your 19-year-old self, what would you say to her today?
Oh gosh, I would tell her that she is beautiful, strong woman who has so much ahead of her, and follow the Lord. That would be my first thing. Don't put him on the side burner. Don't tell him you're not ready. Don't tell him that you're going to choose this life over him. If I could have did it all over again, I wouldn't have put him in the back. And I mean, that's what I did. I literally just said, not right now. It's my time, not yours. And I would never do that again. But I would say whatever decision you made, you are forgiven from your Lord Jesus Christ, whatever you do. And my story is abortion. My story is abuse. My story is vanity, eating disorders. But everybody has something in their story. Yours might look different, but healing is the same with the Lord. It doesn't change whatever it is, whatever that past has been in your life, whether you're the one that suffered or you're the one that's caused the situation. There's healing and forgiveness.
Yeah. Well, friend, thank you so much just for
Thank
sharing
you.
your heart, for your time today. I know that our listeners and our viewers are going to want to connect with you, and you have a special Facebook group that they can connect with on. So how can they find you? And we'll make sure and put it in the show notes as well.
Yep. I have a Facebook group called Mended Post-Abortion Recovery. And I absolutely encourage any woman who is looking for healing, any woman who's considering abortion, anything around that arena, I would love to connect.
I love it. Well, thank you again for your wisdom.
Thank you.
And willing to share, and just appreciate you so much. Very proud of you.
Thank you, friend.
Absolutely.